The bullet shattered the lantern 3 inches from Felicity Morrison's head, and she knew in that instant they would kill her before dawn if she did not run. Glass rained down onto the wooden floorboards of the Silver Pine Hotel room as she dropped to her knees, heart hammering against her ribs like a wild animal trying to escape a cage. The acrid smell of kerosene filled her nostrils as fuel spread across the floor, and she could hear boots pounding up the staircase. They were coming for her now, no longer content with threats scrawled on paper and shoved under her door. The men who owned this town had decided that Felicity Morrison, newspaper correspondent from San Francisco, had seen too much and spoken too loudly about what she had witnessed in the silver mines of Ely, Nevada. It was September of 1881, and Felicity had arrived in this high desert town 6 weeks earlier with a leather satchel full of notebooks, 3 spare dresses, and a determination to write the truth about the working conditions that were killing men by the dozens. The mine owners had been cutting corners, ignoring safety protocols, and when the inevitable collapse came 2 months ago, trapping 17 miners underground, they had sealed the entrance rather than mount a rescue. 17 men left to die in the dark because it was cheaper than the attempt to save them. Felicity had interviewed the widows, had collected testimony from miners who knew what really happened, and tomorrow morning her story was set to run in 3 major California newspapers. But tomorrow morning would never come if she did not survive tonight. She crawled toward the window, keeping low as another shot punched through the door. Splinters exploded inward, and she heard a voice she recognized. "Miss Morrison, you need to come out now. We just want to talk." It was Harold Pembroke, the mine superintendent, and his reasonable tone made her blood run cold. Reasonable men who fired guns through doors at women were the most dangerous kind. Felicity reached the window and risked a glance outside. The drop was 15 feet to the alley below, and even if she survived the fall without breaking an ankle, they would have men waiting. She could see 2 figures standing near the corner, illuminated by the dim light from the street. Her mind raced through options, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. The door would not hold much longer, and the spreading kerosene was inching toward the overturned stove where embers still glowed. Then she heard something unexpected. A voice from the alley below, low and urgent. "Miss, if you are planning to jump, best do it now. I will catch you." Felicity looked down and saw a man standing directly beneath her window. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long duster coat, and even in the dim light she could see he had positioned himself with his arms raised. This could be another trap, another one of Pembroke's men, but the door was splintering behind her, and fire was about to bloom across the floor. She made her choice in a heartbeat. Gathering her skirts, she climbed onto the windowsill, balanced precariously for one terrible moment, and then pushed off into the darkness. The fall seemed to last forever, and no time at all. She felt strong arms catch her, breaking her momentum, and then they were both tumbling to the ground in a controlled collapse that left her breathless but unbroken. The man rolled with the impact, keeping her protected, and came up in a crouch with a revolver suddenly in his hand. "Stay down," he whispered, and she obeyed, pressing herself against the side of the building as shouts erupted above them. The 2 men at the corner of the alley were running toward them now, and Felicity could see her rescuer's face clearly for the first time in the light spilling from a nearby window. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with sharp features and eyes that reminded her of a hawk. There was a quiet competence in the way he moved, shifting his weight and raising the revolver with practiced ease. "I would not come any closer, gentlemen," he called out, his voice carrying a distinctive drawl that marked him as someone from farther south, perhaps Texas. "This lady is under my protection now." One of the approaching men laughed, though there was no humor in it. "That is Fletcher Quinn's business, Cowboy. You best move along before you get hurt." "Funny thing about that," the man with the revolver said, and Felicity caught the faintest hint of amusement in his tone. "I do not take well to men who shoot at women through doors. Call it a character flaw." "There are 2 of us and 1 of you," the second man said, but he had stopped advancing, clearly reassessing the situation. The cowboy's stance was too confident, too ready. 2.5, I would say, the cowboy replied. Your friend there looks like he is about to run, and we both know it, but I will make this simple. You can go back to whoever sent you and tell them the lady is not available for conversation tonight. Or we can settle this now, and I promise you will not enjoy how it ends. There was a long, tense moment where Felicity forgot to breathe. Then the first man spat into the dirt and gestured to his companion. This is not over, Quinn. Pembroke wants what she has, and he will get it one way or another. Quinn, Felicity whispered, as the two men retreated and the cowboy holstered his weapon with a fluid motion. He turned to her and offered his hand to help her up. Fletcher Quinn, madam. And you must be the newspaper lady who has stirred up such a fuss. We need to move quickly. Those two will be back with reinforcements, and I would prefer not to shoot anyone tonight if it can be avoided. Felicity took his hand and stood, brushing dust and debris from her dress. Her legs felt unsteady, and she realized she was trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. I need to get my notes, my documents. Everything is in my room. Your room that is currently being shot up and is about to catch fire? Fletcher asked, raising an eyebrow. I appreciate your dedication to your work, but I think those notes are beyond retrieval right now. You do not understand, Felicity said urgently, gripping his arm. Those documents are the only proof I have, testimony from witnesses, records I copied from the mine office. Without them, my story is just allegations. They can deny everything. Fletcher studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. You newspaper people are all half crazy, you know that? Stay here! Before she could protest, he was moving, quick and silent as a shadow. She watched in amazement as he scaled a support post to reach the first-floor roof, then used a drain pipe to pull himself higher. Within moments, he had disappeared through her window, and Felicity pressed herself against the wall, every nerve screaming at her to run while simultaneously rooting her in place. She could not leave without knowing if he made it out. Time stretched impossibly. She heard shouts from inside the hotel, the crash of furniture, and then Fletcher was back at the window, her leather document case clutched in one hand. He dropped it first and she caught it, nearly collapsing under the unexpected weight. Then he was climbing down, moving with the same easy grace, and dropping the last few feet to land beside her. Your room is well and truly on fire now, he said, slightly out of breath. We need to go. My horse is 2 streets over. They ran through the darkness of the alley, Felicity clutching the document case to her chest like a shield. Her lungs burned and her dress hampered her movement, but Fletcher matched her pace, occasionally glancing back to check for pursuit. When they reached his horse, a large bay gelding with intelligent eyes, he helped her mount first and then swung up behind her, settling her in front of him in the saddle. Hold on tight, he said, and she felt his arm come around her waist as he spurred the horse forward. They galloped through the quiet streets of Ely, past darkened storefronts and houses where honest people slept, unaware of the violence playing out in their midst. Felicity had never ridden like this, pressed against a stranger's chest with the wind tearing at her hair and fear and exhilaration mixed in her blood until she could not tell one from the other. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 30 minutes, following a trail that led east into the high desert. The moon was 3/4 full, providing enough light to navigate by, and Fletcher clearly knew where he was going. Finally, he slowed the horse to a walk and then stopped near an outcropping of rocks that formed a natural shelter. We will rest here until morning, he said, dismounting and then helping her down. There is water in the rocks, and we are far enough out that they would not find us in the dark even if they were foolish enough to try. Felicity's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Fletcher steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Thank you, she managed, her voice hoarse. You saved my life back there. Maybe, he said, already unsaddling his horse, or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. You have made some powerful enemies, Miss Morrison. Men like Pembroke do not give up easily. How do you know my name? And how did you know I was in danger? Felicity asked, setting the document case down carefully and watching as Fletcher worked. He glanced at her, his face shadowed by his hat brim. I know your name because everyone in town knows it. You have not exactly been subtle in your investigation. As for knowing you were in danger, I have been watching Pembroke's men for the last 2 days. I am a ranch hand at the Double Bar Ranch, about 20 miles south of here, and my boss sent me to town to pick up supplies. I happened to be at the general store when I overheard two of Pembroke's thugs talking about how they planned to silence a troublesome reporter before her story could run. And you decided to help me out of the goodness of your heart? Felicity asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. In her experience, men rarely did anything without expecting something in return. Fletcher finished with the horse and turned to face her fully. My younger brother died in a mine collapse 3 years ago in Colorado. Different mine, different state, but the same story. The owners cut corners, ignored warnings, and when the supports failed, they sealed the entrance with 20 men still alive inside. Said it was too dangerous to attempt a rescue. So when I heard what Pembroke and his associates did here, and when I learned someone was finally trying to hold them accountable, I figured it was worth missing a night's sleep to make sure you lived long enough to tell your story. The raw honesty in his voice cut through Felicity's defenses. She sank down onto a flat rock and put her head in her hands. I am sorry about your brother. What was his name? Thomas. He was 19. Fletcher sat down on another rock a few feet away and pulled out a canteen, taking a long drink before offering it to her. He wanted to save up enough money to buy his own place, maybe raise horses. He was good with them. Felicity accepted the canteen and drank gratefully, the water cool and clean. Thomas deserved better. They all deserve better. That is why I have to make sure this story runs. The men who died here, the families they left behind, they deserve justice. Justice is a fine thing, Fletcher said, pulling out a piece of jerky from his saddlebag and breaking it in half to share with her. But it does not do much good if you are dead. What is your plan, Miss Morrison? Those men will be looking for you come sunup, and Ely is not a big enough town for you to hide in for long. Felicity chewed the jerky slowly, buying herself time to think. I need to get to the telegraph office in the morning and send my story to the newspapers in San Francisco. Once it is transmitted, killing me becomes pointless. The truth will already be out there. The telegraph office that is right in the center of town, surrounded by Pembroke's men, Fletcher asked dryly. That sounds like a solid plan with no possible flaws. Do you have a better idea? Felicity shot back, frustration sharpening her voice. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert landscape bathed in moonlight. Actually, I might. There is another town about 40 miles north of here, Pioche. It is bigger than Ely, has its own telegraph office, and Pembroke's influence does not extend that far. We could ride there, you could send your story, and by the time anyone figured out what happened, you would be on a stage heading back to California. 40 miles, Felicity repeated. How long would that take? On horseback, pushing hard, we could make it in 8 or 9 hours. But my horse is already tired from tonight's excitement, and you would need to ride double with me the whole way. It would not be comfortable. Felicity looked down at her dress, already torn and filthy from the night's adventures. Somewhere in the chaos she had lost her hat, and she could feel her carefully pinned hair coming loose. She must look like a madwoman, and the idea of spending 8 hours pressed against a stranger on horseback made her cheeks burn. But what choice did she have? All right, she said finally. We ride to Pioche, but I need you to understand something, Mr. Quinn. I can pay you for your help, but not much. I spent most of my money on this investigation, and what I have left would not be enough to compensate you for the risk you are taking. Fletcher stood and walked to the edge of their shelter, looking out at the horizon where the first faint hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. I am not doing this for money, Miss Morrison. I am doing it because some things matter more than staying safe and keeping your head down. My brother died in the dark, alone and scared, because men valued profit over human lives. If helping you means one less family has to go through what mine did, then that is payment enough. Something in Felicity's chest tightened at his words. She was accustomed to cynicism, to people acting out of self-interest. The newspaper business had shown her the worst of human nature, and her investigation into the mine collapse had only reinforced that perspective. But here was this cowboy, risking his life for a woman he had never met, asking nothing in return except the satisfaction of doing what was right. "Thank you," she said softly. "And please call me Felicity. I think we have moved past formalities." He turned back and gave her a slight smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the sharp edges and making him look younger. "Then you should call me Fletcher. We should try to rest for a couple hours before we ride. The horse needs it, and so do you." "I do not think I could sleep if I tried," Felicity admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that bullet coming through the window." Fletcher nodded in understanding. "That will fade with time, though it never entirely goes away. The first time someone shot at me, I was 17 and working as a ranch hand in West Texas. Cattle rustlers tried to make off with part of the herd, and I was fool enough to try to stop them alone. They missed, thankfully, and I learned a valuable lesson about picking my battles." "And yet here you are, making yourself a target by helping me," Felicity pointed out. "True," Fletcher acknowledged, "but I am older now, and presumably wiser. I know when a battle is worth fighting." They sat in companionable silence as the sky continued to brighten. Felicity found herself studying Fletcher in the growing light, noting details she had missed in the chaos and darkness. He was lean and weathered in the way of men who spent their lives working outdoors, with sun-darkened skin and lines around his eyes from squinting against bright horizons. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard for everything he had. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of capability that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. "Can I ask you something?" Felicity said after a while. "Why were you really in town? You said your boss sent you for supplies, but that seems like a convenient excuse." Fletcher looked at her, and she caught a flash of surprise in his expression before he smiled again, this time with a hint of chagrin. "You are perceptive. I suppose that is what makes you a good reporter. The truth is, I came to town because I wanted to meet you." "Meet me?" Felicity repeated, caught off guard. "Why?" "Because I read your articles about the mine collapse in the territorial newspaper. Someone at the ranch gets it delivered every week, and your pieces about what happened here stood out. They were angry and compassionate at the same time, and they did not pull punches about who was responsible. I thought to myself, here is someone who actually gives a damn about the truth. I wanted to see if the person who wrote those words was as fierce in real life as she was on the page." Felicity felt heat rise in her cheeks, and she was grateful for the dim light that might hide her blush. "And what is your assessment? Am I as fierce as you expected?" "Fiercer," Fletcher said without hesitation. "You were willing to jump out a second-story window to escape, and the first thing you wanted to do afterward was go back for your notes. Most people would have run and never looked back." "Most people have more sense than I do," Felicity said wryly. "My editor certainly thinks so. He warned me before I came here that stirring up trouble with mine owners was a good way to end up at the bottom of a shaft. I should have listened." "If you had listened, 17 families would never get justice," Fletcher pointed out. "Sometimes doing the right thing means ignoring the sensible advice." As the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Fletcher stood and began saddling his horse again. "We should move. The longer we wait, the more time Pembroke's men have to organize a search. With luck, they will waste time looking for you in Ely and the surrounding area before they think to check other towns." Felicity gathered up her document case and approached the horse, which eyed her with what she could swear was skepticism. "I should probably mention that I am not an experienced rider. In San Francisco, I take the cable cars." "Just hold on tight and trust the horse," Fletcher said, mounting first and then reaching down to help pull her up. "His name is Copper, and he has better sense than most people I know. He will get us where we need to go. Settling in front of Fletcher with his arms on either side of her to hold the reins, Felicity tried to ignore how intimate the position felt. She could feel the warmth of his body against her back, could smell the clean scent of leather and soap and something else that was uniquely him. It was deeply inappropriate, and if her mother could see her now, she would faint dead away. But her mother was safe in San Francisco society, and Felicity was fleeing for her life across the Nevada desert with a cowboy she had met only hours ago. They rode north as the sun climbed higher, following trails that were barely visible to Felicity's untrained eye, but that Fletcher navigated with confidence. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all sagebrush and rock formations, and vast stretches of empty space under an impossibly blue sky. Occasionally they saw jackrabbits or heard the distinctive buzz of a rattlesnake, but mostly there was just the steady rhythm of Copper's hooves and the creak of leather. After they had been riding for perhaps 2 hours, Fletcher spoke up. "Tell me about your story. What evidence do you have against Pembroke and the mine owners?" Felicity shifted slightly in the saddle, grateful for the distraction from her growing discomfort. "I have sworn statements from 5 miners who were working the day of the collapse. They all say the same thing. The supervisors knew the supports in that section were failing, but they pushed the men to keep working anyway because the vein they were excavating was particularly rich. When the collapse happened, there were 23 men in that section. 6 made it out in the first few minutes. The entrance was still partially clear, and rescue was absolutely possible. But Pembroke ordered it sealed, claiming the whole tunnel was unstable and any rescue attempt would cause a larger collapse. "But that was not true?" Fletcher asked. "According to the chief engineer, no. I found him drinking himself to death in a boarding house 2 towns over. He quit the day after the collapse because he could not live with what they had done. He told me the tunnel was damaged but structurally sound, and a rescue team could have reached those men within hours. Pembroke sealed it because he did not want anyone seeing the substandard supports and the other safety violations. Better to sacrifice 17 men than face lawsuits and regulatory investigations." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "That is murder, plain and simple. That is what my article calls it." Felicity agreed. "I also have financial records I copied from the mine office that show they were spending half what they should have on safety equipment and materials. The owners were pocketing the difference. I broke into the office at night and copied everything I could before the clerk arrived in the morning." "You broke into the mine office?" Fletcher sounded impressed and appalled in equal measure. "You really do not do anything halfway, do you?" "If you are going to accuse powerful men of murder, you need ironclad evidence," Felicity said. "Anything less and they can dismiss it as the ravings of a hysterical woman with an agenda. That is what they were already saying about me in town, actually. That I was making up stories to sell newspapers. Anyone who actually reads your articles would know that is nonsense," Fletcher said. "Your work is thorough and well-sourced. You are better than most of the reporters whose work I have read." The praise warmed Felicity more than it should have. How does a cowboy become familiar with the quality of journalism? "My mother was a school teacher before she married my father," Fletcher explained. "She made sure all her children learned to read well and think critically. She used to say that an uneducated man was easy to control, but an educated man was dangerous to tyrants. She had strong opinions about a lot of things." "She sounds like a remarkable woman. Is she still in Texas?" Fletcher shook his head, and Felicity felt, rather than saw, the shadow that passed over his mood. "She died when I was 22. Fever took her. My father followed 6 months later. People said it was his heart, but I think he just could not live without her. They were devoted to each other in a way you do not see often." "I am sorry," Felicity said softly. "You have lost a lot of people." "Life out here is hard," Fletcher said simply. "You learn to appreciate what you have while you have it, and you learn to keep moving when it is gone. Speaking of which, We need to pick up the pace if we want to reach Pioche by mid-afternoon. Can you manage a faster gait? I will manage, Felicity said, though her legs and back were already aching from the unfamiliar position. She had never been one to complain, and she certainly would not start now when Fletcher was risking so much to help her. They rode harder, and Felicity focused on the rhythm of the horse beneath her and the steadying presence of Fletcher behind her. They stopped once to water the horse at a small creek and to stretch their legs, but Fletcher was clearly anxious to keep moving. As they mounted again, Felicity caught him scanning the horizon behind them. "Do you think they are following us?" she asked. "I think it would be foolish to assume they are not," Fletcher replied. "Pembroke has resources and men. Once he realizes you are not in Ely, he will start checking the surrounding area. We need to stay ahead of him." The sun was past its zenith when they finally saw Pioche in the distance, a sprawling mining town nestled in the highlands. It was considerably larger than Ely, with multiple streets and what looked like several substantial buildings. Relief flooded through Felicity at the sight. "We made it," she breathed. "We made it here," Fletcher corrected. "Now we need to get your story transmitted without drawing attention. Pembroke may have contacts in this town as well." They rode in slowly, drawing some curious looks from people on the street, but nothing that suggested alarm. Fletcher guided Copper to a livery stable, where he arranged for the horse to be fed and watered, then helped Felicity dismount. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, and Fletcher caught her around the waist, steadying her. "Take a moment," he said quietly. "Let the blood flow back." Felicity stood there, gripping his arms for support, acutely aware of how close they were standing. She looked up and found Fletcher watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Concern, certainly, but something else as well. Something that made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear or exertion. "I am all right," she said, though her voice came out slightly breathless. "Where is the telegraph office?" Fletcher released her, though she noticed he stayed close as they walked up the main street. The telegraph office was easy to find, a small building with a painted sign and a clerk who looked up with professional courtesy as they entered. "Help you folks?" he asked. "I need to send a telegram to San Francisco," Felicity said, approaching the counter. "Actually, I need to send the same telegram to 3 different newspapers. It is quite lengthy. How much would that cost?" The clerk named a price that made Felicity wince, but she had just enough money to cover it. She pulled out her notebook and began transcribing her article, writing quickly and efficiently while Fletcher kept watch by the window. It took nearly 40 minutes to write out the full text of her story, including the key details and attributions, but finally she handed the pages to the clerk. "This needs to go out immediately," she said. "It is urgent." The clerk looked over the pages and his eyebrows rose. "This is about the Ely mine disaster. That is going to stir up some trouble, miss." "That is exactly the intention," Felicity said firmly. "Can you send it or not?" "I can send it," the clerk said slowly. "But you should know I had a man in here yesterday asking questions about a female reporter from San Francisco. Said there was a reward for information about her whereabouts. He did not leave a name, but he had the look of mine company muscle." Felicity felt ice slide down her spine. Fletcher had crossed the room in 3 quick strides and was standing beside her. "Did you tell him anything?" he asked the clerk, his hand resting casually on his revolver. The clerk held up his hands. "I did not have anything to tell. I had not seen any female reporters, but he gave me a way to contact him if I heard anything. Said the reward was $50. $50 was a substantial sum, more than the clerk probably made in 2 months. Felicity saw him glance at her, then at Fletcher's gun, then back at her. He was calculating odds, weighing options. "I will give you $60 on top of what I am already paying if you send these telegrams immediately and forget you ever saw us," Felicity said quickly. "That is more than you would get from the mine company, and you do not have to feel guilty about helping men who let 17 miners die." The clerk considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. $60, and you are out of my office as soon as the messages are sent. I do not want any trouble." "Agreed," Felicity said, counting out bills from her rapidly diminishing funds. It would leave her with almost nothing, but it did not matter. Nothing mattered except getting the truth out. The clerk worked quickly, his fingers flying over the telegraph key as he tapped out Felicity's article in Morse code. She stood tensely, watching and listening to the rapid clicking, while Fletcher remained by the window. After what felt like an eternity, the clerk finished the last telegram and looked up. "Done. All 3 newspapers will have the full text within the hour." "Thank you," Felicity said sincerely. "You have done the right thing." "I hope so," the clerk muttered. "Now please leave before I change my mind." Outside, Fletcher took Felicity's elbow and guided her away from the telegraph office at a brisk walk. "We need to get out of this town now. If Pembroke's men were here yesterday, they are probably still around." "Where do we go?" Felicity asked. "I cannot afford the stagecoach fare, and I am not sure I could survive another 8-hour ride on horseback." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, thinking. "The Double Bar Ranch, where I work, is about 30 miles southeast of here. My boss, Jack Hartley, is a good man. He would let you stay there until things cool down, and you can arrange safe passage back to California. It would mean a few more hours riding, but after that you could rest properly." The idea of a safe place to rest was almost overwhelmingly appealing. Felicity had been running on fear and determination for so long that the thought of letting her guard down made her want to weep. "Are you certain your boss would not mind?" "I am a stranger, and I come with considerable trouble. Jack hates mine owners who cut corners almost as much as I do," Fletcher said. "His father was a miner who died young from lung disease because the companies would not invest in proper ventilation. He will understand." They retrieved copper from the livery and were preparing to mount when they heard shouting from the direction of the telegraph office. Fletcher and Felicity exchanged a quick glance, and without a word they both started moving faster. Fletcher practically threw Felicity onto the horse and vaulted up behind her, spurring Copper into a gallop before they had even cleared the livery yard. Behind them, Felicity could hear more shouting and the sound of running feet. She risked a glance back and saw 3 men pouring out of a building across from the telegraph office, pointing in their direction. One of them was raising a rifle. "Hold on!" Fletcher shouted, and Copper surged forward with a burst of speed that nearly unseated Felicity. She clutched the saddle horn with white knuckles as they raced through the streets of Pioche, scattering pedestrians and drawing startled exclamations. A shot rang out behind them, but the bullet went wide, pinging off a water trough to their left. They tore out of town and back into open country, Fletcher guiding Copper with expert skill along a trail that wound between rocky outcroppings. The horse was tired from the morning's long ride, but he responded gamely to Fletcher's urging, stretching out into a ground-eating pace that put distance between them and their pursuers. After several miles, Fletcher slowed Copper to a walk and looked back. There was no sign of pursuit on the trail behind them. "I think we lost them, at least for now. They will have to get their horses before they can follow, and by then we will have a good lead." Felicity realized she was shaking, the aftermath of adrenaline making her feel lightheaded and slightly sick. "This is insane. We are being hunted like criminals, and all I did was try to tell the truth." "Welcome to the reality of taking on powerful men," Fletcher said grimly. "The truth is dangerous to them, so they try to destroy anyone who threatens to expose it. But you got your story out, Felicity. That is what matters. By tomorrow, people across California will know what Pembroke and the mine owners did. You won." "It does not feel like winning," Felicity said, but she clutched her document case closer, feeling the weight of the testimony and records inside. Fletcher was right. The story was out there now, beyond Pembroke's reach. Whatever happened to her, the truth had been spoken. They rode for another 3 hours, stopping periodically to rest Copper and stretch their aching muscles. The landscape gradually changed as they moved southeast, becoming slightly more hospitable with occasional stands of juniper trees and patches of grass. The sun was sinking toward the western horizon when Fletcher pointed ahead to a cluster of buildings visible in a valley. That is the Double Bar Ranch, he said, and Felicity could hear the relief in his voice. We are almost there. As they drew closer, Felicity could see that the ranch was a substantial operation. There was a main house built of timber and stone, several outbuildings including what looked like a large bunkhouse and extensive corrals holding horses and cattle. Smoke rose from the main house chimney, and she could see figures moving around the property. They rode into the ranch yard and were immediately approached by a man in his 50s with iron gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent outdoors. He looked at Fletcher with obvious surprise. Quinn, we did not expect you back until tomorrow at the earliest. What happened? Then his gaze moved to Felicity, taking in her disheveled appearance and the way she was sitting in front of Fletcher. His eyebrows rose. And who is this? Fletcher dismounted and helped Felicity down before turning to face his boss. Jack, this is Felicity Morrison. She is the reporter who has been investigating the Ely mine collapse. Some men tried to kill her last night to stop her story from running. I helped her get to Pioche to send her articles by telegraph, and now we need somewhere safe to stay for a few days while things settle down. Jack Hartley studied Felicity with keen eyes, and she forced herself to stand straight despite her exhaustion. She would not appear weak or helpless in front of this man who was clearly measuring whether she was worth the trouble. The reporter, Jack said thoughtfully, I read your articles in the paper. Powerful work. You have got some influential people very angry at you, I imagine. That would be an understatement, Felicity said. I understand this is an imposition, Mr. Hartley, and I apologize for arriving on your doorstep with so little warning. If you can spare a horse, I can move on and find somewhere else to stay. In your condition? You look like you are about to fall over, Jack said bluntly. And where exactly would you go? Anyone looking for you will check every hotel and boarding house within 100 miles. He turned to Fletcher. These men who are after her, how dangerous are they? They shot through her hotel room door and set fire to her room, Fletcher said. They chased us out of Pioche with rifles. I would say they are very serious about silencing her. Jack nodded slowly, his expression hardening. Then I suppose we need to make sure they do not succeed. My wife Martha will want to meet you, Miss Morrison. She has been following your articles with great interest. She lost an uncle to a mine collapse when she was young, so this issue is close to her heart. Come up to the house and we will get you settled. Relief made Felicity's knees weak. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I cannot tell you how much this means to me. Thank me by staying alive long enough to see those mine owners face justice, Jack said gruffly. Fletcher, take care of Copper and then join us in the house. We need to talk about security and how long you think this situation will last. Fletcher nodded and led Copper toward the barn while Jack escorted Felicity to the main house. Inside, she found a comfortable home that managed to be both rustic and refined. A woman in her late 40s emerged from what looked like the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She had kind eyes and graying blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun. Martha, this is Felicity Morrison, the reporter from the newspaper, Jack said. She has had some trouble and will be staying with us for a while. Martha's eyes widened. The reporter? Oh, my dear, I have been reading your articles and hoping someone would finally hold those terrible men accountable. Come in, come in. You look absolutely exhausted. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? Felicity tried to remember and could not. Yesterday morning, I think. Unacceptable, Martha declared, taking Felicity's arm and steering her toward a chair. Sit down before you collapse. I will heat up some stew and biscuits, and then we will see about getting you cleaned up and into some proper clothes. Those look like they have been through a war. The kindness in Martha's voice finally broke through Felicity's defenses. She sank into the chair and felt tears prick her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. She would not fall apart now, not after everything she had been through. Over the next hour, Felicity ate more food than she thought she could hold, told Jack and Martha an abbreviated version of the events of the past day, and was shown to a small guest room where Martha provided her with a basin of warm water and some clean clothes. The dress was a bit large, as Martha was taller and more generously built, but it was clean and whole, and Felicity could have kissed the hem in gratitude. When she emerged, feeling marginally more human, she found Fletcher sitting at the kitchen table with Jack, both men nursing cups of coffee. Fletcher had cleaned up as well, and without the dust and grime of travel, she could better appreciate his features. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes before he stood politely. "Feel better?" he asked. "Immeasurably," Felicity admitted, taking the seat Martha indicated. "Mr. Hartley, Fletcher mentioned you have had your own experiences with the mining industry. I am sorry for your loss." Jack nodded acknowledgement. "My father worked the California gold fields in the 50s and 60s. Made enough to buy this land, but the work destroyed his lungs. He died coughing up blood when I was 18. I swore then I would never work in a mine or have anything to do with the industry, so you will find no love for mine owners in this house, Miss Morrison. Please, call me Felicity, and I am grateful for your understanding." She paused, then continued. "What do you think will happen now? My articles will be published tomorrow morning. Will that be enough to stop Pembroke and his men from coming after me?" Jack and Fletcher exchanged glances. "Hard to say," Jack admitted. "Once the story is public, there is less incentive to silence you. On the other hand, powerful men do not like being exposed, and they might want revenge regardless of the practical considerations. We should plan for the possibility that they will keep looking for you. I will not bring danger to your family and your ranch hands," Felicity said firmly. "If staying here puts you at risk, I should leave." "You will do no such thing," Martha interjected, setting a cup of tea in front of Felicity. "This ranch has weathered rustlers, harsh winters, and financial panics. We can handle a few thugs from a mining company. Besides, you need rest and time to recover. You look like a strong wind would blow you over." "Martha is right," Fletcher said quietly. "You have been running on pure determination for weeks, maybe months. You need to let yourself stop and breathe for a while." Felicity wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. The constant fear, the pressure of her investigation, the weight of knowing that 17 families were counting on her to get justice for their dead husbands and fathers, it had all taken a toll she was only now beginning to feel. "A few days," she conceded. "Just until I am certain the articles have been published and it is safe to travel. Then I will return to San Francisco and face whatever consequences come from this story." "Consequences like becoming famous?" Martha suggested with a smile. "Your articles are already making waves, dear. This story will make your career." "I did not do it for my career," Felicity said softly. "I did it because it was right." Fletcher met her eyes across the table, and she saw understanding and something deeper there. Something that made warmth bloom in her chest despite everything she had been through. Over the next few days, Felicity settled into an unexpected rhythm at the Double Bar Ranch. She slept in a real bed for the first time in what felt like forever, ate Martha's excellent cooking, and gradually felt strength returning to her body and clarity to her mind. Jack had two of his most reliable ranch hands keeping watch on the approach roads, but there was no sign of Pembroke's men. Fletcher, meanwhile, returned to his normal duties around the ranch, but Felicity found herself watching for him throughout the day. She told herself it was simple gratitude, an understandable attachment to the man who had saved her life. But she knew she was lying to herself. There was something about Fletcher Quinn that drew her in ways she had never experienced before. On the third day of her stay, Felicity was sitting on the porch of the main house, writing in her notebook and enjoying the late afternoon sun when Fletcher approached. He had been working with horses in the corral, and there was dust on his clothes and sweat on his brow. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please," Felicity said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "I was just making notes for a follow-up article. Several newspapers have already sent telegrams asking for more details and offering to pay for additional stories." So Martha was right about your career, Fletcher observed, settling into the chair with the easy grace she was coming to associate with him. It appears so, Felicity admitted, though it all feels rather surreal. A week ago, I was worried I would never work again if this story failed. Now I am turning down assignments because I have too many offers. You deserve the recognition, Fletcher said. What you did took courage. Not many people would risk what you risked for the sake of strangers. They were not strangers to you, Felicity said quietly. Because of your brother. Is that why you helped me, Fletcher? Because I reminded you of him? Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the landscape. At first, maybe, but that is not why I stayed. Felicity's heart began to beat faster. Why did you stay? He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. Because somewhere between catching you when you jumped out that window and riding through the night with you holding on to me, I started to care about you for reasons that had nothing to do with my brother or justice or any other noble cause. I stayed because I wanted to, because I could not imagine leaving you to face this alone. The honesty of his words pierced through all of Felicity's carefully constructed defenses. Fletcher, You do not have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know you have a life in San Francisco, a career that is about to take off. You do not belong in places like this, working yourself to exhaustion on a dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere. I just wanted you to know that these last few days, getting to know you, talking with you, watching you write your articles with that fierce concentration you get, it has meant more to me than you might realize. Felicity set down her notebook and turned in her chair to face him fully. You think I do not belong here? Fletcher, I have spent the last 3 years of my life in San Francisco society, attending functions and trying to make connections so I could get the assignments I wanted. I have smiled at men who thought my ambition was cute, who patted me on the head and told me to stick to writing about fashion and society events. I have fought for every single article I have published, and I am tired of fighting to be taken seriously in a world that does not want women like me to exist. But here with you, I have not had to fight. You saw me as I am and valued me for it without me having to prove anything. That is because you are remarkable, Fletcher said simply. Anyone with eyes can see that. Then why can you not see that I care about you too? Felicity said, her voice wavering slightly. From the moment you caught me in that alley, you have been steady and brave and kind. You risked your life for someone you did not know, and you asked for nothing in return. You made me feel safe when I thought I would never feel safe again. How could I not care about you? Fletcher reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. Felicity, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying I do not want to go back to San Francisco and forget you, Felicity said, lacing her fingers through his. I am saying these last few days have been some of the best of my life, despite everything. I am saying I would like to see where this goes if you want the same thing. For answer, Fletcher stood and drew her to her feet, pulling her close. I want that more than I can put into words, he said, and then he was kissing her. Felicity had been kissed before, chaste pecks from suitors her parents had approved of, and one slightly more passionate encounter with a fellow journalist that had ultimately led nowhere. But this was different. Fletcher kissed her like she was precious and vital, like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms going around his neck, her body pressing against his solid warmth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Felicity found herself laughing with pure joy. Well, she said, that was worth waiting for. Fletcher grinned, looking younger and lighter than she had ever seen him. I will take that as a compliment, though we should probably step back before Jack or Martha see us, and I get a lecture about proper courting behavior. Let them lecture, Felicity said recklessly. I am tired of doing what is proper and expected. For once, I want to do what makes me happy. And I make you happy? Fletcher asked, though there was no doubt in his voice, only pleased confirmation. You make me very happy, Felicity confirmed. Now we just need to figure out the minor details, like where we will live and how we will make this work when I have a career in California and you have a job here in Nevada. Minor details, Fletcher agreed, though his smile faltered slightly. We will figure it out, Felicity. Somehow. That night at dinner, Felicity and Fletcher sat close together, their hands occasionally brushing under the table in a way that made her feel like a schoolgirl. Martha noticed, of course, and smiled in a knowing way, but she said nothing. Jack raised an eyebrow at Fletcher, but made no comment. After the meal, as Felicity was helping Martha clean up, the older woman spoke quietly. He is a good man, you know, one of the best I have ever met. He has had a hard life, losing so much family, but it has not made him bitter. It has made him careful about what he values. I know, Felicity said softly. That is part of what draws me to him. He knows what matters. And you matter to him, Martha said. I can see it in the way he looks at you. But you have to understand, Felicity, a life out here is not easy. The winters are harsh, the work is endless, and it can be lonely. You need to be certain this is what you want before you make any promises. I appreciate your concern, Felicity said, but I am not afraid of hard work, and I have been lonely in the middle of cities full of people. What I am afraid of is letting this chance pass because I am too cautious to take a risk on something that feels right. Martha smiled and patted her hand. Then I think you and Fletcher will do just fine. Now Jack had word from town today. Your articles have been published and are causing quite the sensation. There are calls for investigations into the mine companies and demands for new safety regulations. You did what you set out to do, dear. You got justice for those families. Relief and satisfaction washed over Felicity. Do you think it is safe for me to travel now? If the story is public and there is official attention on the mine companies, surely Pembroke would not dare try to hurt me. I would give it a few more days, Martha advised. Let things settle and see which way the wind blows. Besides, you are not that eager to leave us, are you? Felicity glanced toward the window, where she could see Fletcher talking with Jack by the barn, their silhouettes outlined by the setting sun. No, she admitted. I am not eager to leave at all. Over the following weeks, Felicity found herself living a life she had never imagined. She continued writing, taking on assignments from multiple newspapers who wanted her perspective on labor issues and mining safety. But she wrote from the Double Bar Ranch, sitting on the porch or at the kitchen table, while around her the life of the ranch went on. She learned to ride properly with Fletcher as her patient teacher. She helped Martha with cooking and mending, discovering domestic skills she had never needed in her boarding house life in San Francisco. She talked with the ranch hands and learned about their lives, their hopes and fears, and she found story material in their experiences that would never have occurred to her before. And she spent time with Fletcher, hours and hours of talking and laughing and learning each other. They rode out into the vast Nevada landscape, and he showed her hidden valleys and secret springs. They sat up late by the fire, sharing stories of their childhoods and their dreams for the future. They stole kisses when they thought no one was watching and held hands under the table during meals. 6 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Felicity received a telegram from her editor in San Francisco. The mine companies had agreed to a settlement with the families of the dead miners, paying substantial damages and agreeing to implement comprehensive safety improvements. 3 executives, including Harold Pembroke, had been forced to resign and were facing criminal charges. The investigation Felicity's articles had sparked was expanding to other mines across the Western Territories. You did it, Fletcher said when she showed him the telegram. They were sitting by a creek on ranch property, enjoying a rare afternoon of leisure. Everything you fought for. We did it, Felicity corrected. If you had not helped me get to Pioche, if you had not protected me and given me a safe place to recover, none of this would have happened. You are as much a part of this victory as I am. Fletcher was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. What happens now, Felicity? Your work here is done. Will you go back to San Francisco? Felicity had been wrestling with this question for days. She had offers for lucrative positions at major newspapers, opportunities that would have seemed like impossible dreams just a few months ago. But the thought of leaving Fletcher, of returning to a life that suddenly felt hollow and meaningless, made her chest ache. What if I did not go back? She said slowly. What if I stayed here with you? Fletcher turned to stare at her. Felicity, you cannot give up your career for me. What you do is important. You have a gift for finding truth and sharing it with people who need to know. You cannot throw that away to live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. I would not be throwing it away, Felicity argued. I can write from anywhere. Telegraph lines reach even out here. What I cannot do from San Francisco is be with you, and I have discovered that matters more to me than anything else. You would resent me eventually, Fletcher said, though she could hear the longing in his voice. You would miss the excitement of the city, the access to sources and stories. You would feel trapped. Felicity reached out and took his face in her hands, making him look at her. Fletcher Quinn, I have spent 3 years feeling trapped in the life I thought I wanted. Out here with you, for the first time in my life. I feel free, free to be myself without judgment, free to do work that matters, free to love someone who sees me as an equal partner rather than a pretty accessory or a curiosity to be tolerated. If you think I would give that up to go back to a city where I had to fight for every scrap of respect, you do not know me as well as I thought you did. You love me? Fletcher asked, his voice rough with emotion. Desperately, Felicity confirmed. I love your strength and your kindness and your quiet competence. I love how you face danger with calm courage and how you treat everyone with respect, regardless of their station. I love how you make me laugh and how you challenge me to be better. I love you, Fletcher, and I want to build a life with you if you will have me. For answer, Fletcher kissed her with a passion that stole her breath and left her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers. I love you too. From the first moment I saw you in that alley, looking fierce and terrified and determined all at once, I think some part of me knew you were going to change my life. Marry me, Felicity. Be my wife and my partner and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Yes, Felicity said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely, yes. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Jack and Martha as witnesses and a traveling preacher officiating. Felicity wore a dress Martha helped her sew, simple and practical, but beautiful in its clean lines. Fletcher wore his best shirt and actually looked nervous, which Felicity found endearing. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers of the assembled ranch hands and the fond smiles of Jack and Martha. Felicity felt joy bubble up inside her, pure and bright, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. They spent their wedding night in a small cabin on the far edge of ranch property, a place Fletcher had been fixing up in secret as a surprise. It was modest but comfortable, with a real bed and a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over spectacular views of the surrounding landscape. It is perfect, Felicity breathed, looking around their new home. It is yours, Fletcher said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Ours. I know it is not much compared to what you could have had, but Felicity turned in his arms and kissed him to stop the words. It is everything I want. You are everything I want. Please stop worrying that I will regret this choice. The only thing I would regret is not making it. That night, they came together with passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention they had devoted to learning each other's minds and hearts. Felicity had approached their wedding night with some trepidation, her knowledge of such matters limited to vague warnings from her mother and equally vague romantic descriptions from novels. But Fletcher was patient and gentle, and the awkwardness quickly gave way to pleasure and connection that left her breathless with wonder. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Felicity felt peace settle over her. This was home. Not a place, but a person a feeling of belonging she had searched for without knowing it until she found it. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked, his fingers trailing lazily through her hair. "That I am happier than I ever imagined possible," Felicity said honestly, "and that I cannot wait to see what our life together looks like." Over the next months, they built that life together. Felicity continued her journalism work, taking on stories about labor conditions and social justice issues across the Western Territories. Her reputation grew, and she became known as a fearless advocate for working people. But she wrote from the cabin she shared with Fletcher, and her research trips were carefully planned around the rhythms of ranch life. Fletcher continued working for Jack Hartley, but he also started training horses on the side, a skill that brought in extra income and that he clearly loved. Together, they saved money with a goal of eventually buying their own small ranch, a dream that seemed more achievable with each passing month. Their first winter together was harsh, with snowstorms that trapped them in the cabin for days at a time. But Felicity found she did not mind. Those long evenings by the fire, talking and reading, and simply being together became some of her most treasured memories. Fletcher taught her to play chess, and she taught him the finer points of grammar and composition. They argued good-naturedly about politics and philosophy and made love with a passion that only seemed to grow stronger with time. In the spring, Felicity discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of emotions, joy and fear and excitement all tangled together. She told Fletcher one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and she watched his face transform with wonder. "A child," he said softly, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Felicity, are you happy about this?" "I am terrified," Felicity admitted. "I have no experience with babies, and I have heard so many stories about the dangers of childbirth. But yes, I am happy. I want to have a family with you, Fletcher. I want to create something good and lasting." "We will figure it out together," Fletcher promised, kissing her forehead. "Just like we figure out everything else." Martha was thrilled when they shared the news and immediately took it upon herself to educate Felicity about pregnancy and childbirth. Jack offered them a room in the main house for the last months of the pregnancy, wanting them close by in case of complications. But Felicity was determined to stay in their cabin for as long as possible, treasuring the privacy and independence it represented. As summer turned to fall and her body changed with the growing life inside her, Felicity continued to work, though she limited her travel and focused on stories she could research and write from home. She wrote a series of articles about women's experiences in frontier communities, drawing on interviews with ranch wives and small-town shopkeepers and the hardy women who ran boarding houses and restaurants. The series was well received and further cemented her reputation. In late November, on a clear, cold night, with stars blazing overhead, Felicity went into labor. Martha and Fletcher stayed with her through the long hours, Martha providing experienced guidance and Fletcher simply holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When dawn broke and she finally delivered a healthy baby boy, Felicity wept with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming love. They named him Thomas after Fletcher's brother, and the baby had his father's dark hair and what promised to be his mother's stubborn determination. Fletcher held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and Felicity knew she was watching one of the most important moments of his life. "Thank you," he whispered to her. "For this, for everything. You have given me a family again, Felicity. You have given me hope and purpose and more love than I knew how to ask for." "We gave those things to each other," Felicity said, exhausted but happier than she could express. "We are a team, remember? Partners in everything." The years that followed were full and rich in ways that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Thomas grew into a bright, curious child who loved horses and books in equal measure. Felicity continued her journalism career, becoming one of the most respected labor reporters in the Western Territories. Her articles influenced legislation and brought attention to injustices that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Fletcher became a sought-after horse trainer, his reputation for patience and skill spreading throughout Nevada and beyond. After 5 years of careful saving, they were able to buy their own small ranch, 40 acres with good water and enough grazing land for a modest herd. They named it the Morning Star Ranch and built a house with their own hands, helped by friends from the Double Bar and the wider community. 2 years after Thomas, they had a daughter they named Mary for Fletcher's mother. She had her mother's red hair and her father's calm temperament, and from the time she could walk, she followed Thomas everywhere, determined to keep up with her older brother. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that tested their resources, and harsh winters that killed livestock. Felicity's work sometimes put her in conflict with powerful interests, and there were times when threats reappeared, though never again with the intensity of those first desperate days in Ely. But through everything, she and Fletcher faced challenges together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the porch of their ranch house, watching Thomas teach Mary how to ride a gentle mare while the sun set in glorious colors across the Nevada sky. Fletcher's arm was around Felicity's waist, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Do you ever regret it?" Fletcher asked quietly. "Giving up the city life? The big career opportunities?" Felicity turned to look at him, seeing the lines that time and work had etched into his face, the silver starting to appear at his temples. She saw the man she loved more deeply than she had known was possible, the partner who had stood beside her through everything. "Never," she said firmly. "I gave up nothing, Fletcher. I gained everything that matters. A home, a family, work that fulfills me, and a love that sustains me through everything. I made my choice in that alley in Ely when I jumped out that window trusting you to catch me, and I have never looked back. I will always catch you," Fletcher promised, kissing her softly. "That is what partners do." As darkness fell and they called their children in for dinner, Felicity reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Nevada to expose the truth and seek justice for miners who died in the dark. She had found that, but she had also found something she had not known. She was searching for a place to belong, a purpose beyond her career, and a love that transformed everything. The story she had written about the Ely mine disaster had changed laws and saved lives. The reporting she continued to do made a difference in the world, giving voice to those who might otherwise go unheard. But the greatest story of her life, she knew, was not one she would ever write for publication. It was the story she and Fletcher were living together, day by day, choice by choice, building something beautiful and lasting from courage and truth and love. Years later, when Thomas and Mary were grown and starting families of their own, Felicity would sit on that same porch with Fletcher and watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that never got old. They would hold hands like teenagers after all those years together, and she would think about that terrified woman who jumped from a window into the arms of a stranger, trusting him to catch her. He had caught her, and he had never let her fall. Together they had spoken truth when others wanted silence, had built a life when circumstances could have torn them apart, and had created a family rooted in love and respect, an unwavering partnership. The mine owners had wanted her silenced before she could speak truth. Fletcher had made sure truth was spoken loud, and in doing so, he had given her not just survival, but a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a happiness that exceeded anything she could have imagined in those desperate days when she was simply trying to stay alive long enough to finish her story. Their story, she realized, had no ending. It simply continued, evolving and growing, day by beautiful day. And that, she thought, was the best possible outcome of all. On a warm spring afternoon, many years after that first desperate night in Ely, Felicity sat in a rocking chair on her porch, now a grandmother several times over, watching her grandchildren play in the yard while Fletcher worked with horses in the nearby corral. Her hands, now wrinkled and spotted with age, still held a pen with confidence as she worked on her memoir, a book she had been asked to write about her life and career. She paused in her writing and looked up at the scene before her. Thomas's children were here today, 3 wild and wonderful youngsters who had Fletcher's dark hair and Felicity's green eyes in various combinations. Mary's eldest daughter was helping her grandfather in the corral, showing the same natural affinity for horses that ran in the family. Fletcher caught her watching and smiled, that same smile that had made her heart skip beats for 4 decades. He walked over to the porch, moving a bit slower than he once had, but still strong and capable. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "How it all started," Felicity said, reaching for his hand. "How scared I was that night. How certain I was that I would not survive to see my story published. How you appeared out of nowhere and changed everything." "I was not nowhere," Fletcher said with a grin. "I was exactly where I needed to be. Funny how that works out." "Fate," Felicity suggested. "Or just good timing," Fletcher replied. "Either way, I am grateful for it every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their family and feeling the satisfaction of a life well lived. Felicity thought about the young woman she had been, driven and ambitious, and so focused on her career that she had not realized what was missing. That woman would barely recognize her life now, yet Felicity knew she would not trade a single moment of it. The truth she had been so desperate to speak all those years ago had been important. The mine owners had faced justice, laws had been changed, and lives had been saved because of her courage and determination. But the deeper truth, the one she had discovered in Fletcher's arms as they fled through the Nevada night, was that the greatest victories came not from standing alone, but from finding someone to stand with. They had stood together through everything: danger and hardship, joy and sorrow, the everyday challenges of building a life from nothing. And in standing together, they had created something that lasted, something that mattered more than any headline or byline ever could. As the sun set on another day at the Morning Star Ranch, painting the sky in the brilliant colors that had become familiar as home, Felicity squeezed Fletcher's hand, and he squeezed back. No words were needed. After all these years, they understood each other perfectly. The cowboy had made sure truth was spoken loud, but the truth that resonated longest was not the one in her newspaper articles. It was the truth they lived every day, that love was the greatest story of all, and partnership was the foundation on which all other victories were built. And that truth, Felicity knew, would echo long after both of them were gone, carried forward in the lives of their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built with their own hands, and in the legacy of courage and integrity they had worked so hard to create. The story that began with a bullet and a leap of faith had become a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. And as far as endings went, Felicity could not imagine a better one, except that it was not really an ending at all, but rather a continuation, a legacy that would ripple forward through time, speaking its own truth to future generations. She had wanted to expose the truth and give voice to the voiceless. She had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. But the greatest truth of all was sitting beside her, holding her hand as the stars began to appear overhead, reminding her that love was the story worth telling, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. They had spoken truth together, loud and clear, and the echoes would never fade.